So yeah, great to see that there's so many people on this call today. Too many for us to go around and do introductions, I think. I've got 2 pages appearing on here, but what would be useful at this point for me before I delve into it is just either a show of hands if you are on screen or just using the icon, the reaction. How many of you have done the survey before? And I'll assume those of you that don't put your hands up. Okay, so probably about 40%, 30%. Okay, that's great. Thank you. I've now got lots of hands. I don't know if I can get them all down. You might have to take them down yourself. Thank you. Okay, so a little bit of background to those of you who aren't that familiar. So CUBO have been doing the annual benchmarking survey for several years now, and I know you'll have been inundated with the emails in terms of what it is, but it's a really valuable piece of research that's been conducted each year, and it's growing. We've got some fantastic numbers, which I'll talk about in a short while, in terms of capturing what's happening across commercial services within the sector ultimately, because we are taking that cross sample of CUBO members. It's a survey that I know overlaps with some other surveys that are out there, but from our perspective, it's probably the only one that captures all of commercial services under one roof, so to speak, so that when we start leveraging the data and looking at it from one area to another, I think there's some really rich information that can come out of that. What I'm going to do today is I'll go through the output, so the dashboard, and what you get for putting your time and investment in, and how that demonstrates your own data against sector averages. I'll then talk through very quickly, if you haven't registered, how you can go about doing that, and we'll look very briefly at how to actually complete the survey itself. I'll try and keep that fairly succinct and top line to start with. I'll then invite sort of Simon in so we can have a bit of a discussion in terms of what he gets out of the survey at the University of Birmingham, and that should then hopefully open up into a bit more of a Q&A or a discussion that we can spend the rest of the time on. So I'll share my screen. I won't be able to see most of you once I do this, so if there's anything that you need me to stop and you've got a particular question on them, please do shout as opposed to put your hand up, or Sarah, if you can keep an eye if someone's got their hand up, that'd be really useful. So okie dokie. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'll just go into okay, so yeah, hopefully this is sharing this now. So in terms of the dashboard, this is the output. So this is what you get if everybody does the survey. And I think this is the user-friendly or the impactful way of talking you through this. So all of the data for the last few years we've been compiling, rather than just giving you a raw Excel spreadsheet, it all goes into a Power BI dashboard so that you get a very user-friendly interface in terms of what your results are giving you, and that's information that you can export very easily into your own reports, etc. So everyone gets their own unique dashboard based on their own unique survey, but what we do is we benchmark it across everything. As a user point, it's always best to view your dashboard in full screen, so I've just put that arrow on. It's highlighting how to minimize the screen. The other way is expanding. The reason of doing this is it enables you to then get very quick access to the titles, and straight away this shows you all the information that we're collecting within the survey as well. So we connect very general top line information about institutions themselves, so size, number of students, if you're Russell Group, post 92, if you're a single campus, multi-campus, etc. So we can build up a picture of the type of institution you are. And that becomes really important when we start looking at how we can filter the data as we move on. We then get into some of the specifics. So there's a few pages of questions and therefore data, responses around residences. We've got a dedicated section on residential life. I'm not doing this in any order, but then we jump into the different types of rooms, rents, prices, catered rooms, self-catered rooms, contract terms, etc. We have a dedicated section on catering and hospitality. So we look at food and drink within outlets. We then also look at, can't think, conference and events in terms of that as well. Conferencing facilities, if you have dedicated hotel facilities as well. Dedicated section on sport, swimming pools, and then getting down into security, soft FM, etc. So it really does capture the depth and breadth of commercial services, as I said. And you can go into any of these quickly if you use the title function on this. In terms of the information that you get, and again, this is all linked to what you've been putting in, it's exactly like I said. We've just taken some sort of generic information here. So this would be personalized to your own institution, and it will show you all of your responses against the average responsible participants. So at the moment, the data that you're looking at here, hopefully you can see my cursor, but you've got an average response of 22,000 students against a respondent response of 46. So every single piece of data that you put in that's within this dashboard comes back as an average. The really key bit, and I'll come back to this, is at the top of the screen, you'll notice this was from 2 years ago. We had a region and a turnover filter. Last year, we managed to expand that into a different filter, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but we were just shy of a few institutions of being able to put 3 filters in. And this is where I think the dashboard becomes really important and useful to the majority of you, that you don't always want to compare yourself against the whole of the sector. You want to compare yourselves as close to like for like as you can. We can't do that exactly in this type of broad reaching survey, but we can get more refined and closer, and the more respondents we have, the further we can take this. We've got 64 institutions responding now. That indicates that we should be able to bring a 3rd filter in, and we should be able to, depending on how the individual institutions land, be able to filter either by region, by institution type, so Russell Group, post-92, turnover might still be an option there. What we know is important, and we couldn't do it last time, but looking at the numbers now, we should, is by campus type. So if you are a single campus, like a city campus university, if you're a multiple campus university. So the more responses we have, the more we can build up this filtering, because the important thing for us is this is an anonymous process. So we want to make sure that there's enough sort of critical mass within the filters that you're not just doing one against another, because it might be too easy for you to identify who that other institution is. And I can elaborate on that as we move forward. But that's where the real power comes into this. So you've got examples on the screen now in terms of students, turnover, total revenues. You can then drill down into more specific areas. I've just got some examples up here at the moment. So again, still on catering here, looking at salaries, GP, food cost, etc., size of workforce, pay grades, so entry points for entry level staff, etc. Staying on the catering, because that's our example. First time round, again, food and drink prices. So looking at how drinks, how your cross section of some beverages, food items, compare against the rest of the sector. Again, we can't do absolutely everything within this survey. People have already flagged, yeah, there's quite a lot to it. But hopefully within each section, we're able to start to paint a picture of how the sector's looking, how you might be performing against some of your comparable institutions. And then that might then kick into, right, now we know where to look. We can go off, we can do a further deep dive into some of this information. So all of the tabs are presented with, as I say, sort of user-friendly visual representation of the responses. I can't go into any of the slides without going into a live survey, and I don't think anyone really wants me to sort of show live data at this point, but I can certainly talk through some more of the information on the dashboard, but that should give you a bit of a feel for it. I'll move on to some time frames and how we can go about completing data collection, and then I'll pause for breath. So we started the survey on the 21st of October, so we've been running for a couple of weeks. We are up to 64 institutions as of the end of last week. I haven't seen an update yet. I know there's been a few more people that have registered. There's about 160 people that are completing the survey across those institutions. So you can have as many people as you want within your institution completing your spreadsheet, and I'll come on to the spreadsheet shortly. We've got until the 29th of November, so still a healthy amount of time to input to register and input your data if you've not yet registered. That then gives us December to go through the data validation exercise and just make sure that what people have put in is accurate. That's an area we've worked on over the last couple of years to try and get it tighter and tighter, and we feel we're in an even better place this year than we were last year. So that gives us some time before you all wrap up for Christmas just to come back with any queries that might get kicked out of the data entry. We will then flip that into the dashboard through December and early January, and all being well, providing there aren't any complications or extensions granted through this process, your individual dashboard should then come to you in the middle of January. This again is something that we brought forward quite drastically, and Simon, I'm sure, will comment on this because he was sort of influential in looking at the time frame for this. That we know a lot of your strategic decision making for the following year happens quite early into this academic year. So by giving you this data early and hitting this in January, we're hoping that gives sufficient time for institutions to be able to actually use that information and think about how it might inform some of the bigger picture decision making that you've got. Those that participate get their individual dashboard that they can compare against the sector or against their filtered sample, but we give at least a month. In this case, I think we're given about 6 or 7 weeks before we anticipate releasing our final report, which is an overall summary. And again, that's to make sure that those that take part get the advantage of the information before anyone else gets sight of it. But we'll be working on a sector-wide sort of state of the nation report that will come out again, hopefully early March, as we currently sit in terms of that. So that's the process. I can come back onto the timeframes. What does it look like in terms of doing this if you're not yet registered? So I'll share the link in the chat, but we've got a very simple Google Forms link just for individuals who want to take part and complete part of the survey or all of the survey on behalf of their institution to populate their information. Again, this just captures general information so we can send the link out to you, but also highlights the different areas of the survey you're likely to complete. And that will just help us as we chart progress over the coming weeks to know who we might want to individually sort of chase up if something's not yet happened. Again, for anyone who's leading their institution on this survey, that then becomes quite useful, that we can share with you, accommodations not being done, catering's fully done, etc. So we know who to give a healthy nudge to. So I can share that link if you haven't already received it. And then in terms of the survey itself, I will bring it up here. Hopefully you can still see my Excel spreadsheet. Just hide this. Okay, here we go. So what you get in terms of completing the survey itself is this Excel spreadsheet. It's saved in OneDrive on SharePoint. So providing you have Microsoft as part of your institution email system, etc., then it's very straightforward access. Everyone within your institution will be shared the same link, so it's a live document. Again, it means that multiple people can complete it multiple times, and we advise everyone to complete it live, sort of in the shared file, so that we can keep track of progress. Sorry. In terms of progress, you'll be able to see how your survey is doing, and where there's question areas, it will demonstrate on this progress tab what's been completed and what hasn't. So under this template, obviously nothing's been done yet, but again, it just highlights the different sections that we're looking at. And again, in terms of what this end looks like that drives that Power BI dashboard, it's very simple sort of data entry points in terms of top line information. There will be drop downs to make sure that you put yourself within a bracket that we can then compare against the rest of the sector. So in terms of type of campus structure that you have, that's an area we want to be able to drive our filtering. Again, regions, we've got that built in specifically. You can click next, or you can just jump to the tabs that are relevant to you. Again, in terms of top line information, we're capturing institution turnover, headcount, muscle group, post 92, etc. So again, these are areas that we really want to build that filtering in, and providing we have enough institutions, we can do that and make sure that it's still done in an anonymous and effective way. And then there's a lot of information in here, so I don't want to bog you down in the minutiae, but again, it's general sort of entry points for all of the information. So residences, rents, prices, section on your catered rooms. Again, looking at pricing, number of rooms that you own that are in third party, looking at occupancy percentages. In general, we are capturing information from last year, so 23-24. But we also use this as a milestone, so capturing occupancy at the start of this year as well. So there'll be a few areas within the survey where we might be capturing data from last month, because we want to see how the start of the year is looking in comparison to last year. And there's a couple of areas where we might look at 23-24 in comparison to 22-23. And again, that's because a big part of this survey is that we are trying to get that longitudinal view as to what the sector is doing, how it's evolving, especially coming out of COVID. So in the early years that Russell Partnership got involved, we were looking at pre-COVID to post-COVID. Now we're fully looking at what's happened over the last 3 years, and that all comes out within the main summary. I won't go through all of these tabs at this point because I think I'll get lost in too much detail. So I will.
Just to interject there, James,
Yeah.
We've got one question in the chat there from Lynn Cassidy with some questions.
Okay, in the chat. Oh, couple of Are there any additional comments? I think we still have that in.
It's
But
not in all of the sections, James. It's only in some this year. So on one where I would have previously popped it in at the bottom, I've ended up moving it onto the next page. I can't think which one it is off the top of my head because I was working on it last week. But I've
right.
kind of referenced it on the next available opportunity and said, for the questions in this section, I can't break it down into that granular detail sort of thing. So
Oh,
just
okay.
doesn't appear on the pages that it was on in previous years.
Okay. I'll have a look through that. We can't add anything back in at this
Retrospectively.
point.
Yeah.
And I'm yet to find a tab that doesn't have that, but I will look through. And what we'll do, oh, gosh, it must be right at the start because I think I've just gone through everything here. But yeah, okay. It's certainly on most, but I appreciate I've just looked at residences overview, rent and prices. So I think it's accommodation if that's an area that you were
I'm thinking,
populating.
I'm thinking because I haven't got the printout either because I'm
Yeah,
working from home today rather than in the office and I've left it in the office. But I think where I've probably added it in the past is probably around the self-catering rooms where it's talking about the occupancy
yeah,
and it's not
yeah.
on those fields there where it would have been in the past.
Okay, no, that's fine. If you um the accommodation contracts tab is essentially the end of that accommodation piece. So if there's anything that you haven't been able to capture within the individual room sections, if you make sure it's in there, then it will pop up when we're looking at the main raw data file.
Okay.
But I'll make a comment and
Thank
a
you.
note on that. So okay, so this one. And I think was there another question in here? So
Yeah, it was just about the overview at the beginning, where obviously it gives you an idea of where you're at with how many questions you've actually already answered. You know, you've had answered 6 out of the 15, but again, in certain cases, so for us against catered accommodation, we no longer have catered accommodation. So I can go back and put in the information that was relevant to the previous year, but I can't answer the questions relevant to this year. So it looks like you've not made any progress on that, whereas having a zero amount or in not applicable would help to then be at least be able to see, because as you see, there's so many people within our organisation responsible for doing that, but then one person will take ownership. So if they're looking at it, they're potentially seeing that, oh, actually, look, we haven't filled that in, but we haven't got any data to fill in because it's no longer relevant to us. So again, I know it's not one for this year, but maybe for next year.
yeah, no, that's fair point. Fair point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll come on to some of the details around some of the problems and things like that. But it'd be good, Simon. He's Simon Vey from University of Birmingham has been very kind to come in and share a few thoughts on this. So, Simon, I know you and the university have utilized the survey for some years now. So, just be good, I guess, to sort of share with everyone why you use it, why you value the annual
Mm.
survey.
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, so the university's engaged for a number of years with the CUBO survey. And one of the primary drivers is we have a 5-year planning process, which I suspect other institutions will do something very similar this time of year. So obviously the priority always in September is to get the students across the line in relation to coming onto campus, utilising our accommodation, settling in, forming friendships, etc. But quite quickly after that, once we've got into the rhythm of if there is such a thing as a typical week, we do turn our attentions to looking in particular to next year, but we actually do a 5-year horizon scanning, and that's actually being pushed out even further in relation to ensuring that we're meeting our aspirations regarding sustainability, which a number of institutions will have targets way beyond 5 years. But in particular, it's a 5-year scan where we look at all our operations, take account of how we fared in that's the previous intake, but also where we wanted to land next year and beyond. And we draw together a raft of information, and that's gathered from, and some institutions will use this no doubt as well. We use the CUBO process to look at efficiencies and effectiveness of a service. So that's a benchmarking service against other institutions. We gather information that's out there from other sources. And those of you who haven't seen the BBC website, it looks like tuition fees are on the rise, as of announced only about an hour ago, which of course will have a massive impact for us all on this call, if depending on what the figure is that comes through. And the CUBO, the CUBO benchmarking exercise has always been one that is tremendously helpful. Because bluntly, yes, we're all very supportive of each other, but we are often vying for the same students. So it's useful to be able to see what others are doing, how people are faring. I'm not going to shy away from that fact. That is one of the drivers. But also, and this goes back to perhaps a more positive position, we know institutions some will do things better than the University of Birmingham, and seeing the raw data in front of you can then prompt conversations when it comes to meeting up at the conferences, etc., etc. So we take a view of looking at it both externally looking and internally. So the first thing is looking at what other institutions are doing, so that we can understand what we are doing right and perhaps on track, and but also to prompt conversations with others that are perhaps performing better than we are, and that performing. It depends on the context of the institution, so context is key here. But it gives us a useful starter to tend to start those conversations. It's also quite compelling if, in relation to each year, I have to sit down with the registrar and the Deputy Vice Chancellor to talk through budgets, and having data to back up arguments is always useful. And I'm sure everybody on this call probably has similar sort of experience. So having that data to hand to impress home that change does need to occur, or certain initiatives have to be carried out, again, is incredibly useful. Of course, at any budget setting process, there's challenge. And again, that data in relation to showing that we are doing things efficiently and we are effective in relation to our service delivery, and having that benchmarking data is tremendously useful to hopefully provide a compelling argument to senior leaders of the university that we are operating appropriately. It also, actually, one thing that we have found is in relation to service standards, it's rare, but it can actually indicate that perhaps we're falling short on certain service standards and price points. So again, that is incredibly informative. And so just looking beyond the university, the CUBO information is good from that purpose. But looking more inwardly as well, we found the data that we get from the CUBO benchmarking exercise enables the senior leadership group of the division in Birmingham, was called Campus Services, is for us to challenge ourselves to say, okay, we're not performing particularly well against benchmark, or we are performing particularly well against benchmark. Why? What can we do to better our position? So it frames conversations internally. It also instills a sense of continue evolution. I don't think anybody would disagree that services can't stand still for very long because student expectations are forever increasing, and understandably and rightly so. But also just the general population in relation to whether it's student accommodation, food offering, etc. The trends are evolving. The CUBO benchmarking exercises helps us to keep us on our toes, bluntly. So again, helps inform those internal conversations. We do internal benchmarking ourselves, benchmarking that's really just shared within the division. But again, often it's the CUBO KPIs and data that help form our key performance indicators. So cross-referencing both ways is incredibly helpful. We also, one big initiative that we're looking at the University of Birmingham, and again, we're anticipating the CUBO benchmarking will help, is looking at, rather than, as perhaps traditionally been the case in many institutions, I'm sure, looking up and down the division of ensuring you're working well together. We're actually looking across all the professional services divisions, so with academic services, with HR, finance, estates, etc., to ensure that actually our services are delivered in a more efficient, effective way, because we're not working within silos. And to a degree, the KPIs can help with that. So that again aids those discussions. I'm really pleased to say that, and thanks to Sarah and James for listening in relation to, I think it was not the last CUBO conference, but the one before that, we talked about the timings of this data. And a number of us piped up to say it tends to be soon after Christmas that we need this information to help inform business planning processes, indeed strategic planning, and that now that this data is available, it's very, very welcome. I think the caveats, the only thing that I ought to flag is what we have found is, and James alluded to this, is every institution is different. Even commercial services, campus services don't have the same mix of portfolio functions within it. So do account for that. Context is key. It's also a snapshot in time. And I just used the slide James put up in relation to the price points. That's fine, but then if food costs go through the roof, you may have to quickly move from where you are now. Does that mean you're completely out of kilter with the sector? Possibly not, because they will have also moved their price points as well. So it is a snapshot in time. And we're also mindful of we don't want to over survey staff. So we put a lot of effort into the CUBO benchmarking exercise, but we're mindful we're asked for data left, right, and centre. So we try and streamline all our KPI workers to ensure that we are only capturing data when we absolutely need it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. That's great. And yeah, I think very comprehensive. So it's probably a good time now, I think, to open the floor to the rest of you in terms of whether you've got any questions for Simon on the back of what he's just mentioned, or again to myself in terms of the functionality of the survey, the dashboard, etc. So does anybody have any queries or anything you want me to go through further? I'll assume that no questions is a positive situation. So has it convinced anyone to go and register right now? I can share the link in the chat, which will probably be useful if I can find it. Bring it up while.
Oh, we've got a question that's just popped up. It's from Anthea. Is the dashboard available immediately to start inputting data?
So the Excel spreadsheet is available. So as soon as someone registers, your profile gets added to the shared file. So all of these files already exist for every institution. That's just done based on CUBO membership. So as soon as someone registers to say, I want to fill it in, you'll get added as a user to that, and we'll share the individual link to the spreadsheet, so that you can start doing it from then. If you're just responsible for a very specific area, you might just be involved in sport, for example, and you really want to be part of this, you can share the link that I've just provided in the chat to the Google Forms to the rest of your peers across the other areas that we're compiling data, and give them a nudge to do that. We do look, and again, it will be something that we always sit down with CUBO at the end of the process and look at completion rates as to what we can share back, because there is a lot of information in here, and we really encourage institutions to populate everything, and certainly as much as possible. And I appreciate that's not always the case. But yes, Anthea, hope that answers your question. The Excel spreadsheet is available to populate immediately. The actual dashboard, the Power BI dashboard, won't get released until January, because we need all of the data to have been compiled before we can flip that information into Power BI, if that makes sense. While some people are thinking about other questions, I will just bring up another page, which is on the CUBO website. And that is the FAQ page. So in the emails that have already gone out, and when people register to take part, you will be sent the link to this survey. It's also in the dashboard itself. There's a hyperlink, sorry, not in the dashboard, in the spreadsheet that you're compiling. Some of it's just generic, but when you get down to the bottom, some of the troubleshooting, we have got some specific information there. So again, a couple of the comments that were raised earlier, will update that into the troubleshooting point down here. So if there is anything that crops up, always come here as a first port of call and just see if it's already something that's been flagged, and we'll address that. And if not, again, in all the comms that go out, there's a support@Russell Partnership email address that's been provided. If you've got any queries, if you send it there, someone within our business support team will pick that up, and it will either come to me, or it will get sent to our tech team if it's something that's beyond my capacity. But we will endeavour to react to that as quickly as we can. So. Okay. So I guess a couple of key takeaways. Simon's comments, I can't say any better than him. This is a survey for members, and it's about what the members get out of it. It is about critical mass. I think from a CUBO perspective, the more participants that take part in this, the better CUBO has an understanding of what's happening in the sector, where the trends are, where things are changing and evolving, and that puts power in, previously into Jan's hands, but nicer as she comes on board, and Sarah and the team, in order to sort of focus where it matters with the sector in terms of stimulating other roundtable focus groups, etc., looking at a deep dive into a particular area of research. Again, this scratches the surface, doesn't necessarily go into the detail that I know some individuals might want in a given area, but it can really set the foundation for, okay, something interesting is happening here. We need to delve into it a little bit further. the 64 institutions that we've got, if they all complete it, sort of comprehensively, that's going to be an amazing data set, much more powerful than we've had before. And as I say, that will put the power into that Power BI dashboard to be able to leverage it, so you are getting closer to your apples for apples. And so I urge you, if you're not involved, get involved, because you really will find the benefit this year. I don't really have a lot more to say. Sarah, I don't know if there's anything from a CUBO perspective you want to add in.
No, I think you've kind of covered everything. Thanks very much both to James and Simon for leading today's session, and for everybody for joining. I think obviously just a reminder, if anybody hasn't yet signed up, obviously you've put the link in the chat there, just to encourage as many people as possible to sign up and take part. And if you've got any questions, obviously do get in touch, and we'll be able to answer for you.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, yeah, I have nothing further to add. Simon, anything else from yourself? No. Okay. Well,
no,
thank you very much,
James. Thanks.
Brilliant.
Brilliant. All right.
Thanks.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks for joining. I'm going to put the recording onto the Knowledge Hub shortly, if anybody wants to refer back to anything that was raised today during the call. And thanks to everybody for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.